Sports leagues are in trouble. As states are legalizing sports gambling, we're seeing more and more scandals arise. At this point, more than half of the US states have legalized sports betting, but these scandals are nothing new. Sports betting has been a huge controversy for years. The Black Sox and Pete Rose are confirmed gamblers. Shohei Ohtani is in hot water because of his interpreter, and even Michael Jordan is mentioned in some conspiracies when talking about sports betting. When people who have extra knowledge or can influence the outcome of a game get involved in gambling, they're putting themselves in danger of not only being banned, but risking jail time, or even, in some cases, their lives.
Referee Tim Donaghy had admitted that he had illegally bet on games he himself had officiated.
This is how you manipulated and how you compromised these athletes and got them to compromise the outcome of a game.
I do not have a problem. I enjoy gambling.
The NBA player has been banned for the rest of his life.
Your job is to serve your family, not your sports betting addiction. You're a wuss, and you need help.
Betting scandals have plagued sports for over 100 years. One of the most notable scandals in sports history came in the 1919 World Series. What began as a showdown between the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds quickly fell victim to controversy, tarnishing the reputation of America's pastime and forever altering the lives of those involved. As the 1919 World Series approached, the Chicago White Sox stood as the overwhelming favorites to come out on top. Although, behind the scenes, a secret plot was unfolding. It was believed that the White Sox first baseman, Chick Gandil, approached gamblers with the idea to throw games in exchange for money. He got himself and 7 other White Sox players on board as they arranged to receive their bribes in 5 $20,000 installments, one after each loss. Faced with financial pressures and the temptation of easy money, several White Sox players agreed to participate in the scheme. The plan was simple: deliberately lose key games in exchange for hefty bribes. Game 1 of the best-of-9 series began, and Eddie Cicotte was the Chicago White Sox starting pitcher. Cicotte won all but one game in the regular season, but as the World Series started, he plunked the first batter of the game, signaling the fix was on. He went on to intentionally pitch his worst game of the year as the Reds won the game 9-1. The White Sox followed up by losing Game 2 4-2. Rookie Dickie Kerr pitched Game 3, and he was not one of the dirty players, and the corrupt White Sox players couldn't stop him from leading them to the win as he shut out the Reds 3-0. The White Sox were able to take control and fix Games 4 and 5, and now trailed in the series 4-1. Yet at this point, the fix started to fall apart. Players were not receiving payments, and they worried that they were set up. Going into Game 6, the White Sox called off the fix and began playing their hardest. They snuck out back-to-back wins to make the series 4-3, but eventually lost in Game 8. 1 year later, after rumors of a Cubs game being fixed surfaced, the Cubs team owner demanded the 1919 World Series be looked at as well. A grand jury investigation began, and all players had to testify. 3 players wrote confessions, but ultimately the players were found not guilty. However, newly appointed MLB Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis delivered the final blow in a landmark decision. Landis banned all 8 players involved in the fix from professional baseball for life. Among the players banned from baseball was Shoeless Joe Jackson, whose involvement in the scandal remains a topic of debate to this day. Despite admitting to and receiving payments from gamblers, his exceptional performance during the series included a series best batting average of .375, raises questions if he was actually throwing games. Jackson was banned for life from a game he loved to play at only 32. He, to this day, has the 4th best career batting average, and we will never know what the rest of this historic career could have entailed. There were many other rumored game fixes in the early history of baseball, but the White Sox were one of the first to get caught on full display. Since this case, The 1919 White Sox are now referred to as the Black Sox due to their dark history. In the end, this scandal put the new precedent in baseball that gambling on a game you play in has severe consequences. But over the next 60 years, the dark side of sports gambling was on full display in college sports. There are thousands of college athletes each year, and none of them get paid. A common technique seen over this span was point shaving in basketball. This is a type of match fixing where a player, coach, or ref tries to change the final score of the game without changing who wins. This is done by colluding with gamblers to prevent a team from covering a published point spread where the gamblers bet on the margin of victory. 35 collegiate basketball players were accused of point shaving 86 games between 1947 and 1951. One of the big ones included Jack Molinas. Molinas was a college basketball star at Columbia. He was so good he went 3rd overall in the 1953 NBA draft. However, after making it to the NBA, his dark secret was revealed. He was convicted of fixing games with the Mafia when he was at college in 1953. The NBA found enough evidence to support this, and he was suspended for life by the league. Then, shortly after, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison, which he ended up serving 5. Fast forward to 1975, Molinas was murdered at the age of 43. This case was never solved, but it was believed that his debts with the Mafia was most likely the reason behind his death. Then, in 1978, Boston College basketball's Rick Kuhn was approached by some friends to shave points in specific games for $2,500. Rick's friends knew they had a great system to make money, so they contacted Henry Hill and James Conway of the Lucchese crime family to join in. If these names sound familiar, that's because the movie Goodfellas is about the organized crime life of these two. Hill met Rick Kuhn and other players of the Boston College basketball team and identified games he believed they could shave points on. He then relayed this information across his crime organization, and they began to spread out bets on these games. Their scheme went undetected for years, until Henry Hill was arrested and became an informant. Hill gave up all the people involved in the scheme, which led Rick Kuhn to initially receive 10 years in prison. These are examples where those involved got caught, but the truth is during this time there were many players who worked with the mob to fix games that probably never got caught. Former mob boss Michael Franzese admitted to having multiple athletes who he won't name working with him to fix games, and this is how many got involved.
I don't care what you do, bring me my money. You see they're scared, so all right, I got another way to work this out. Here's how we're gonna do it. You're a quarterback, okay, you're favored to win by 10 points. The first 3 times you get the ball, you put it in the hands of the other receiver. Put it in the defensive men's hands. You're gonna do this until I tell you you're not doing it anymore. That's how I'll get my money back. Either that or, you know, the threat is we're gonna put you in a hospital. What are they gonna do? They're stuck.
Athletes who associated with mobsters and got deep into gambling debts had almost no way to get out of the situation, except agreeing to shave points or fix the outcome of games. It's an extremely difficult situation to be in, and it makes you question why they got involved at all. Gambling is an addiction, and it can hit athletes just as bad as anyone else. Like confirmed gambling addict Pete Rose. No athlete was more notorious for being in a betting scandal than Pete Rose. Rose is baseball's all-time leader with 4,256 hits. From 1963 to 1983, Rose won 3 World Series, made 16 All-Star games, and was one of sports' most popular figures. In 1984, at 43, he returned to the Cincinnati Reds to become a player coach for a few years before transitioning to a full-time manager from 1987 to 1989. In 1989, the IRS seized betting slips with Rose's name, writing, and fingerprints on them, and the following day, it was reported that he was betting around $8,000 to $10,000 per day on baseball. About a month later, the league announced it was launching a full investigation. A 225-page report from the investigator, John Dowd, was handed over to the commissioner, Bart Giamatti. The report included a full breakdown of his gambling activities, including a day-by-day account of his 1987 betting that included 52 Reds games. It was rumored that during his time as manager, Rose would have his friends sit in the stands and signal the status of his bets to him from the dugout during games. Rose claimed his innocence for years and claimed he never bet on baseball.
I'm happy to look in the camera now and say I never bet on baseball and I never bet on Cincinnati Red baseball.
This didn't matter to MLB, as they found enough evidence in the report and handed him a lifetime ban. As part of the agreement he signed, he would be allowed to appeal the lifetime ban after 1 year, so his thinking at the time was obviously to try and convince the commissioner to lift the ban. But Bart Giamatti, the commissioner of MLB, died a week after Rose signed the ban, and this was never considered by any future commissioners, who all denied the reinstatement for Rose to this day. Right before Pete Rose became eligible for the Hall of Fame, they changed the rules to say anyone who's on baseball's ineligible or banned list is not eligible for the Hall of Fame, and his Hall of Fame candidacy is something that is still debated on a yearly basis. In 2004, Pete Rose came clean and admits to betting on baseball, although he strongly states that he never fixed games. In an interview, he stated, "I bet on my team to win every night because I love my team. I believe in my team. I did everything in my power every night to win that game." Rose thought that if he admitted his fault to MLB, they would reinstate him and allow him into the Hall of Fame. However, no commissioners have budged, and Rose remains banned to this day. The decision to not allow Pete Rose into baseball's Hall of Fame could be due to more than just him betting on baseball, as Rose has a lengthy list of allegations over the years. His public image remains tarnished, and he'll never be looked at the same as he did before the scandal. While Pete Rose might be banned from MLB, you probably aren't. So this summer, go treat yourself to a baseball game using code AWC on SeatGeek for $20 off your first purchase. Blasting a star player's reputation is a big decision for a league, since it reflects poorly on them and turns fans away. Some players are so important to their sport, it's easier to just sweep it under the rug. And as it turns out, this is exactly the thought behind one of the biggest conspiracies in sports history, Michael Jordan's secret gambling suspension. In 1993, Michael Jordan was not only the face of the NBA, but possibly the biggest celebrity in America. At this point, he was at the peak of his basketball career, with 3 consecutive NBA titles, 7 straight scoring titles, and an MVP in the year prior. But 2 days before training camp started in the 1993 through 94 season, Michael Jordan announced his retirement at the shockingly young age of 30. Jordan's decision left fans and analysts bewildered, but was there more to his retirement than met the eye? Jordan's abrupt departure from basketball was followed by a surprising pivot. He pursued a career in baseball, joining the AA Birmingham Barons. He claimed he wanted to pursue a baseball career to honor his dad, who was just tragically murdered. However, his performance on the baseball diamond was far from stellar, batting just .202 in the 1994 season. Speculation soon arose about the real reason behind Jordan's retirement. One prevailing theory suggested that it was not solely his choice, but rather an agreed deal between Jordan and the NBA. This theory says that the NBA was concerned about Jordan's extensive gambling ties and wanted him to take a break. By voluntarily stepping away, Jordan could save face, while the NBA would avoid publicly punishing its most marketable asset. The gambling allegations against Jordan were not out of nowhere. Reports surfaced of Jordan being one of the biggest gamblers in the world. He was spotted in Atlantic City at 2:30 in the morning before the Eastern Conference Finals. In addition, many teammates shared stories about Jordan betting on everything from golf to ping pong to even whose bags would come off the plane first. Jordan was deep in gambling, and this addiction led him to associate with shady people. In late 1991, when police seized the possessions of trafficker James Slim Bueller, they found a $57,000 check signed by Jordan. Jordan later admitted under oath that this was for gambling debt. Then, in 1992, bail bondsman Eddie Dow was killed. $108,000 in checks from Jordan were found on the crime scene in his briefcase. The NBA was concerned with the secret life of Jordan and launched an investigation. After investigation, the NBA found no wrongdoings on behalf of Jordan and he promised not to associate with high-stakes gamblers anymore. Rumors over the next year still surfaced over Jordan gambling, and in 1993, the NBA launched a second investigation. It's mentioned that during the NBA's investigation, Richard Equinas was interviewed. Equinas claimed that in March of 1992, he overheard a phone conversation Jordan had with an unidentified individual. According to Equinas, Jordan was discussing a betting line, mentioning, "So you say the line is 7 points?" While the specific game Jordan was referring to remains undisclosed, these allegations carry significant weight. The NBA's integrity is immediately called into question, as gambling on league games by players is strictly prohibited under Article 35F of the league constitution. However, NBA Commissioner David Stern denied any suggestion of pushing Jordan out, asserting that Jordan had done nothing wrong and dismissing any claims of a gambling addiction or bets on NBA games. But this is just what David Stern and the NBA said publicly, and it could be just him covering up for his star player. Stern had this story straight, but Michael Jordan may have slipped up in his retirement speech when asked if he would return to the NBA.
5 years down the line, if that urge comes back, if the Bulls have me, if David Stern lets me back in the league, I may come back.
Wait, play that back.
If David Stern lets me back in the league, I may come back.
If David Stern lets me back in the league? This statement by Jordan is very fishy. Why would he say, if David Stern lets me back into the NBA? Unless he's suspended or banned, it's the decision of each team's individual front office to sign a player, not the NBA commissioner. Jordan may have slipped up here and accidentally revealed that it was ultimately David Stern's decision to make him retire. In addition, 2 days after Jordan announced his retirement, the NBA closed their investigation on him. Maybe since the issue had been resolved and they were already punishing him? I don't know. Jordan returned to the NBA in 1995 and won 3 straight championships, showing he was still in his prime. This will go down as one of the most interesting conspiracies in NBA history. While easily he could have stepped away from basketball to try baseball to honor his dad, it also makes sense to look at the context and details that suggest that he could have been illegally gambling. We may never know the true reason behind his retirement, but this again shows the sketchy ties with gambling and sports. Unfortunately, there's more than just players sports leagues need to worry about, and in some extreme circumstances, criminals and referees are taking direct action to impact the outcome of games in order to win their bets. In 1997, a high-stakes Premier League soccer match between West Ham United and Crystal Palace became the backdrop for a nefarious scheme orchestrated by a crime organization. The crime organization placed hefty bets on West Ham securing at least a draw in the match. Prior to the game starting, the crime organization infiltrated the security system and rigged the stadium lights so that only they had access to turning them on and off with a remote control. West Ham, early in the second half, scored a goal to tie the game at 2-2. The crime organization then turned off the lights in the stadium, causing chaos and confusion. Unable to restore the lights, the match was prematurely called off, ending in a draw and securing the criminals millions in winnings, serving as a cautionary tale to the lengths that some would go for profit. Then, Tim Donaghy, a former 13-year NBA referee, exemplifies the catastrophic impact of officials gambling on games. His involvement in betting on NBA games not only tarnished his own reputation, but also shook the foundation of trust in the league's officiating to this day. From the outside, Donaghy seemed like a normal family guy through his early career. Yet, in 2003, one poor choice led Donaghy down a dark road. It was a normal weekend day for Donaghy. He just finished off a round of golf with his friend Jack Kincannon. Kincannon began to pick Donaghy's brain about NBA bets, since he had inside information. Eventually, this led to Donaghy telling him what teams he thought would win based on the games he was reffing. Sure enough, Donaghy's bets were spot on, and Kincannon began to earn serious money betting through an illegal bookmaker. The bookmakers had noticed that Kincannon's bet sizes were way larger than normal now, and the bets he placed were winning like Kincannon had never won before. Normally, this guy was a $100 or $200 bettor who would lose more than half of his bets. But suddenly, this seemingly dumb recreational bettor was dropping $10K plus on select NBA games and beating the bookies. Why? There had to be a pattern, the bookmakers wondered. Eventually, one of the bookmakers put it together and realized that Kincannon and NBA ref Tim Donaghy were lifelong friends. So the bookmakers went back and checked the games Kincannon bet on. Sure enough, Tim Donaghy refed all of them. Fast forward to December 12th, 2006. On this night, Donaghy was eating alone in a Philadelphia hotel restaurant. Suddenly, he was approached by an associate of the Gambino crime family, bookmaker Jimmy Batista. Batista sat down with Donaghy and demanded that he never bet with Kincannon again. Batista told Donaghy, "You work for us now," and in exchange for providing Batista with his betting picks, Donaghy would receive $2,000 per game, but only if the pick won. There was no way out of this for Donaghy.
Either way, I was really screwed. If I didn't continue to give him the picks, that he was going to expose me to the NBA or have somebody visit my wife and kids in Florida.
Donaghy obviously felt threatened by Batista and had no way to escape. From what started as just helping out a friend make bets turned into him being forced to work for the mob. Over the next year, using burner phones, Donaghy would call a middleman who would inform the bookies of his pick for the game he was officiating. He would never mention anything about the games, and instead used a code where if he mentioned his younger brother, that meant the home team would cover the spread. Donaghy, feeling threatened for his career and possibly even his life, now had to help ensure games covered the spread. As an official, he had many ways he could make this happen. An anonymous gambler who worked with Donaghy told ESPN that Donaghy said he'd like to call an illegal defense call right away, in the first minute. That way, the gambler said, Donaghy could force the side he'd picked against to play a little less aggressive on defense. He said he'd pick on the big center, or the most valuable player of each team, and he'd try to get them into foul trouble early. Putting the star player in foul trouble early changes the outcome of the whole game. They now play less minutes or play less aggressively, and this can swing a spread multiple points. One game Donaghy refereed that is deemed to be a super controversial game was Game 3 of the Western Conference semifinals between the Suns and the Spurs. The Spurs were the home favorites going into this game, and it seems like Donaghy did everything he could to ensure his brother would cover the spread. Let's look at some of the calls he made. Here, Spurs guard Manu Ginobili drives and is not touched at all going up for this layup, but all of a sudden, a late whistle comes from Donaghy, who is at half court, nowhere near this play. In the third quarter, we have a clear as day charge on Tim Duncan, but of course, Donaghy calls this a blocking foul on the Suns to favor the Spurs. Or let's look late in the game, where Tim Duncan clearly fouls Spurs Amari Stoudemire, although Donaghy chooses to ignore it. The plays go on in this game, and Suns coach Mike D'Antoni even gets a tech for arguing with Donaghy. This just shows how many plays in a game can be controlled by a ref, and one who's betting on a game can be super dangerous. The Suns went on to lose the series, and what was historically a great Suns team now lost another chance at a championship. After the 2007 season, private investigators and the FBI found Donaghy had been betting on games, and they informed NBA Commissioner David Stern. They did not think he was the only official doing this too. So they had a plan to wire up Donaghy so he could get the other allegedly corrupt NBA referees to incriminate themselves. About a month after the meeting with Stern, however, the New York Post blared news of the FBI investigation across its front page. Warren Flagg, a private investigator and former FBI agent who worked on the case, said, "Someone in the NBA notifies the press in order to stop the investigation, in my opinion, to shut it down." The NBA might have feared more refs were working with gamblers and quickly got the word out to shut down the FBI's secret investigation. Upon the news breaking, Donaghy insisted he bet on basketball games he refereed, but he claimed he never fixed games. It wasn't just Donaghy who tried to convince the FBI that he didn't fix games. The NBA did too. David Stern gave his first news conference where he said Donaghy acted alone. This was an episode of gambling, yes, but almost assuredly, not match fixing. It would look really bad for the NBA's image to have refs get away with fixing games for years, so they tried to pin it off as just gambling, not game fixing. Years later, statisticians for ESPN working with referees reviewed footage of games Donaghy refereed, and they found that there was a 4.1% chance that an unbiased ref would have randomly made the calls that Tim Donaghy did during this crooked run. Anything below 5% is considered a statistically significant finding, so this finding basically statistically proves Donaghy was most likely fixing games. Tim Donaghy eventually pled guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 15 months in prison. He has not refereed any games since. A few years after this scandal, in 2009, a startup company called FanDuel created a legal sports betting loophole, which has changed the way we look at sports betting to this day. FanDuel was designed to be an online daily fantasy sports app where you can compete for money. Sports betting was illegal at the time, but fantasy sports were ruled as a skill-based game, and because of this, it was legal. Having a legal way to wager money on sports from the access of your phone or computer was groundbreaking, and FanDuel and their competitor DraftKings became the two largest rising companies through the 2010s. Eventually, sports leagues started to take notice, and they loved it. In 2013, Major League Baseball agreed to a sponsorship deal with DraftKings, and in 2014, the NBA agreed to one with FanDuel. The sports industry was making tons of money as investors, and they were promoting apps like we've never seen before. By 2015, fantasy sports companies were investing more money into ads than the entire beer industry. The success of just a fantasy sports app showed the potential of what could be a billion-dollar industry if all forms of sports betting were legalized. Polls showed that 55% of Americans wanted it to be legal, and NBA Commissioner Adam Silver even made a statement that he wanted sports gambling to be legalized. Pressure had now gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. And in 2018, the Supreme Court lifted the ban on sports betting and deemed it is not the federal government's jurisdiction and the state's jurisdiction on ruling it. After this ruling, 18 states over the next 2 years legalized sports betting, and FanDuel and DraftKings launched online sports betting in states that allowed it. Now, in 2024, sports betting has taken over the sports industry. Advertisements on various betting companies are all over stadiums. You can't watch a game on TV without multiple commercials and live lines being flashed on the screen. 38 states have now legalized it, and by 2024, it's nearly a $10 billion industry, and this is not slowing down. By 2029, it's projected to be a $17 billion industry. As this industry is growing, it's being shoved in the faces of fans and also players. To no surprise, players have now tried betting, and it's been a big problem. In 2022, Calvin Ridley was suspended the entire season for making $1,500 worth of bets on NFL games, some of which included his own team. Then, in 2023, the NFL suspended 10 more players for betting on the NFL or using a betting app while in their team facility. This was unfortunately bound to happen. The hope across sports was the NFL's suspensions would be a warning to all players about the dangers of betting. Yet in March of 2024, we had two of the biggest sports betting scandals of all time. At the same time, Shohei Ohtani is the best baseball player on the planet right now. And in the offseason, he signed the biggest contract in sports history with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Anytime you saw Shohei Ohtani on TV, you likely saw Ippei Mizuhara, Ohtani's translator, right there with him. Ippei was not only Ohtani's interpreter, but best friend. The two did everything together, from living together, training, and Ippei was even Ohtani's personal driver. Ippei claimed he spent more time with Ohtani than his own wife. The two were never not seen together. The season started off and the two seemed happy and like friends, as always. But then, out of nowhere, Ippei was fired from the Dodgers after questions started arising surrounding at least $4.5 million in wire transfers sent from Shohei Ohtani's bank account to a bookmaking operation that's under federal investigation. Multiple spokesmen for Ohtani initially told ESPN that Ohtani had transferred the funds to cover Ippei's gambling debt. But then Ohtani and his attorneys changed the story and were accusing Ippei of stealing the money. It is speculated that Ohtani did not pay off the bet knowingly, although, due to illegal implications of Ohtani paying off the bet, his team changed the story. Federal authorities filed a complaint accusing Ippei of bank fraud in relation to the allegations that he stole money from Ohtani to cover his own gambling debts. The prosecutors have since said Ohtani is considered a victim in this case. If you don't believe it, this text message evidence was leaked that helped prove Ohtani's innocence. Have you seen the reports? Ippei says to a bookmaker on March 20th, shortly after the situation went public. Yes, but that's all bullshit, the bookmaker replied. Obviously you didn't steal from him. I understand it's a cover job. I totally get it. Although Ippei responded, technically I did steal from him. It's all over for me. Reports came out that Ippei placed over 19,000 bets from 2021 through 24. Ippei lost nearly $183 million in total bets and won over $142 million, leaving a net debt of over $40 million. This guy has a serious problem. It even turns out that Ippei was the one who went to the Dodgers PR team and said Ohtani helped pay off the bet, and Ohtani was not even aware that this happened until the news broke. When Ohtani moved to America, Ippei helped open Ohtani's bank accounts. So he had this information and called the banks pretending to be him multiple times to take money. Ohtani even had financial advisors, but due to the language barrier, they communicated to Ohtani through Ippei, and subsequently, Ippei lied and hid the money he stole from Ohtani. In total, Ippei took $16 million from Ohtani. Ohtani had to respond to the situation, and with a new interpreter, he came out and said he never bet on baseball or any sport, and he never had anyone make bets for him. And it looks like all evidence suggests Ohtani is the victim here. Ippei turned himself in to the authorities and could face up to 30 years in prison.
The story seemed to have come to a close, with just Ippei involved, but on May 17th, 2024, reports revealed that David Fletcher, one of Shohei Ohtani's teammates and close friends on the Angels, had also been betting with the same bookmaker as Ippei. Early reports indicate that Fletcher didn't bet on baseball, but he still could face consequences from MLB for using an illegal bookmaker. Additionally, Kansas City Royals minor leaguer Colby Schultz was found using the same bookie. Schultz bet on baseball, specifically on Los Angeles Angels games. It's known that Schultz and Fletcher are best friends. Although Fletcher didn't bet on baseball himself, it's possible he was giving Schultz information to help him bet on Angels games. The news about Fletcher is still developing, and information is expected to come out during MLB's investigation, adding another twist to an already wild scandal.
At the time the Ippei news was breaking, another scandal, which was just as bad, was revealed in the NBA. On January 27th of 2024, DraftKings made an announcement that their biggest winner was Jontay Porter unders. Most fans have no clue who Jontay Porter is, as he's a two-way player on one of the worst teams in the NBA. This was suspicious, but then it got even weirder when one bettor placed a 6-leg parlay on all Jontay Porter unders for $80,000 and made $1.12 million on this. Then on March 20th, Jontay Porter unders were the most successful bets of the night again. This was no longer a coincidence, and the NBA now knew that they had a huge problem. Jontay Porter has had a difficult basketball career to this point. In college, he was always injured and has torn his ACL twice since 2018. He's bounced around the G League and NBA, but has not been able to make a name for himself like his brother, Michael Porter Jr. Jontay may have feared he would not last long playing basketball, and he began to take interest in other ways of making money. On the side, Jontay hosts a Discord and X service that was involved in crypto scams, and then has transitioned to giving sports betting advice. Needless to say, he has a strong interest in making a quick buck and gambling. This interest took over so much that he risked his entire NBA career to fix games. On January 26th, versus the Clippers, Porter made some questionable in-game decisions. Like here, at the end of the first quarter, the ball bounces right to him, and he decides to just hit it down to his teammate instead of grabbing the rebound. This play here would have given him 4 rebounds, and his over-under was 4.5. Then, right after this play, Porter goes straight to his coaches and complains about his eye. Throughout this game, there is not one play where you can find contact was made with Porter's eye. Subsequently, Porter removed himself from the game with an eye injury. This, of course, was the game where a bettor made $1.12 million betting on Porter's unders. The evidence clearly shows Porter limiting his performance in favor of the bet, and then faking an injury to ensure his bet won. On March 20th, Porter left the game versus the Kings with a stomach illness. And of course, this was one of the nights where his unders were the highest earning bets. These were the 2 biggest examples of Porter limiting himself in order to favor bets, but reviewing the footage, you can find any time he has a rebounding prop line, once he gets close to the over, he stops trying to get rebounds. He goes out of his way to not get rebounds, whether he's standing out of the paint or even letting smaller players box him out. This is not how normal basketball players play, especially big men. And the NBA has noticed this, and they just came out with 3 major allegations against Porter. First, they said Porter bet on NBA games himself, which is strictly banned for players in the league. The NBA found that he had used someone else's online betting account to place 13 bets that amounted to $54,000. These bets did not include games that Porter played in, though they did include bets on Raptors games that he did not play in. Second, Porter gave a sports bettor information about his health status ahead of games. This is inside information that players are not allowed to reveal, and it may have helped that bettor place bets to make money. Finally, the NBA found that Porter altered his own actions in games in order to help fulfill a bet someone made. Due to these violations, the NBA has decided to ban Jontay Porter for life. It's always unclear why players get involved in gambling. In most of these stories, at first, it seems like a quick way to make a buck, but then it spirals out of control and leads them down a dark path. As sports betting continues to evolve its influence, the specter of scandal looms large over the world of athletics. From the infamous Black Sox scandal of 1919 to the recent controversies involving Ohtani and Jontay Porter, the intersection of sports and gambling has led to many problems. These incidents serve as stark reminders of the potential consequences when individuals with inside knowledge or influence become entangled in the world of betting. While the legalization of sports betting has brought newfound revenue and excitement to the industry, it's also underscored the importance of upholding the integrity of sports and protecting the well-being of athletes and fans alike. Please consider subscribing.